Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the source material to give you the full story. Tonight, we're digging into President Trump's 2026 State of the Union address, and wow, this was a remarkable speech for a whole bunch of reasons.
Okay, first things first, the length. We're talking almost an hour and 48 minutes. I mean, this wasn't just a speech, it was a political marathon. It's actually the longest State of the Union on record, and you can tell he was trying to lay out absolutely everything.
And the tone? Well, it was set right from the get-go with a line we've all heard before. The whole message was about pure strength and success. He was painting this picture of an America that's back and winning everywhere.
All right, let's get into the meat of it, starting with his big domestic pitch, the America First economy. And believe me, this is where he made some really bold claims. So the big headline grabber was this pretty radical idea. He's saying that tariffs, which he argues are paid by other countries, not us, could bring in enough cash to get rid of the personal income tax entirely. I mean, think about that, a total rewrite of how America is taxed.
But hold on a second. The Associated Press did a little digging and gives us some pretty important context here. Their analysis lines up with what most economists will tell you. Tariffs are, at the end of the day, a tax paid by American businesses and, us. And here's the kicker. Last year, tariffs only brought in about $195 billion. That's less than 4% of all federal revenue. So there's a huge gap between that and what you'd need to replace the entire income tax system.
All right, sticking with that theme of winning, the president then turned to Wall Street. He pointed to the stock market and its record highs as solid proof that the economy is just booming.
But again, context is everything, right? So yeah, a 16.4% rise in the S&P 500, that's a good year, for sure. But the AP analysis puts it into perspective. It's not exactly a record breaker. For example, the market jumped almost 27% in President Biden's first year, and nearly 30% way back in 2013 under President Obama.
Then he rolled out a pretty big new proposal. It's a new retirement savings plan, and it's aimed at the 56 million or so Americans who don't have a plan through their job. The idea is that the government would actually match your contributions up to $1,000 a year.
Okay, so after talking economy, the speech took a really sharp turn towards domestic security. And this is where the president started using some very emotional, very personal stories to make the case for his tough policies on crime and immigration.
He started by telling the story of Delilah Coleman, a young girl who survived a really terrible car crash. He explained the crash was caused by a truck driver who was an immigrant here illegally, and he used her story to roll out a new proposal, Delilah's Law, which would stop states from giving commercial driver's licenses to people in that situation.
And then he honored another family, the Beckstroms. Their daughter, Specialist Sarah Beckstrom, was a National Guard member who was tragically killed in an ambush right near the White House. The president made a point to say that her attacker was from Afghanistan and, in his words, shouldn't have been in our country.
So you see how these heartbreaking stories were used to justify a really quick, really broad policy shift. The administration immediately announced they were stopping visas for Afghans, taking a second look at green cards from what they call countries of concern, and just hitting pause on all asylum applications. The reason given? National security.
From there, the speech went global. He started laying out this really muscular, very transactional view of foreign policy. And this is where you can really see that state merchant idea in action. It's this mindset where diplomacy is treated kind of like a business deal, where national interest is all about the bottom line.
And the Venezuela plan he laid out? It's like a textbook example of this. You've got Step 1, a U.S. military raid to capture their president, Maduro. Step 2, work with the new government. And Step 3, unleash extraordinary economic gains. And let's be clear, when he says that, he's talking about getting access to Venezuela's massive oil reserves.
And this business deal approach wasn't just for adversaries. It was for our allies too. When he started talking about forcing NATO countries to spend more on their own defense, up to a 5% mandate, you could literally see the room split in two. Republicans were on their feet cheering for this kind of pay-to-play alliance. But on the other side, Democrats were mostly sitting on their hands, clearly uncomfortable with changing the whole idea of mutual defense.
Then he moved on to Iran. He made it sound like a deal was close, but he put all the pressure on them. He said they still hadn't said the secret words, basically a promise that they would never, ever build a nuclear weapon.
Well, here's the thing. The AP fact check on this was pretty much instant. Their reporting shows that Iranian officials have actually made that exact promise many times. In fact, on the very same day as the speech, Iran's foreign minister wrote on social media, and I'm quoting here, "Iran will, under no circumstances, ever develop a nuclear weapon." So, yeah.
He also took a victory lap on the Middle East, claiming he was the one who negotiated the ceasefire in Gaza and got, in his words, every single hostage back. Now, while the deal did stop the fighting for a bit, the AP points out that a real, lasting peace in the region is still a long way off.
So you have all this policy, all this tough talk, and it's all happening in a room that felt like a perfect snapshot of a divided America. Honestly, the reactions from the crowd were almost as important as the speech itself. You had frequent outbursts, especially from Democrats. At one point, when the president was talking about immigration enforcement, you could clearly hear Representative Rashida Tlaib's shout out, "You're killing Americans."
And even when it seemed like everyone might agree on something, it just didn't last. He called for a ban on insider trading for members of Congress, and for a second, almost everyone stood up and clapped, Republicans and Democrats. But that moment of unity? It lasted for about 5 seconds before it all fell apart into partisan shouting again.
And the president himself was right there stirring the pot. Right after that brief moment of applause, he just couldn't help himself. He looked over and made a crack about the former speaker, asking, "Did Nancy Pelosi stand up?" And of course, the Republican side just erupted. So the night ended exactly how it unfolded, like a perfect picture of two different Americas. When the speech was over, you had Republicans flooding the aisle, congratulating the president, a total celebration. And on the other side of the room, Democrats were just streaming out the doors, totally silent, no applause.
It really felt like it was one speech, but heard by two different parties living in completely separate realities. And that leaves us with this big, lingering question, doesn't it? When the vision for the country is so divided right down the middle, what is the true state of the union?